Rain hammered down on the stone steps outside the glass tower, turning Henry Carter's borrowed suit into a heavy, soaking burden. He had just walked out of the interview rejected because he didn't fit the image, despite having saved hundreds of difficult customers from disaster. Henry gripped his briefcase strap tighter, turned his back, and resolved not to beg. But the moment his foot touched the puddle, a woman's voice rang out behind him. "Henry, stop!" And billionaire CEO Alexandra Reed ran straight into the rain, calling his name in front of everyone. Henry Carter was 36 years old. His hands told the story of his life calloused from scrubbing floors, scarred from years of hotel maintenance work, rough from 3 years of night shifts as a janitor in the very building where he had just been humiliated. But those hands had also held a dying wife, raised a sick child, and never once been lifted in anger or desperation for the past 3 years. Henry had worked the graveyard shift at Reed Towers, mopping marble floors while the city slept. Before that, he had spent 8 years in hotel services, 8 years of handling guest complaints, managing VIP arrivals, coordinating with security during emergencies, and solving problems that would have sent less experienced workers running for management. He had been good at it. No, he had been excellent at it. His wife, Sarah, had passed away when Leo was 3 years old. Henry didn't talk about it much. Grief was a private thing, something he carried in the spaces between breaths. On the day of her funeral, while relatives whispered their condolences and offered casseroles, Henry had sat in the hospital parking lot with Leo strapped into the back seat, the boys wheezing audible even over the sound of rain on the windshield. He had turned around, looked his son in the eyes, and made a promise. "I won't let you struggle to breathe ever again, whatever it takes." It was a promise that had cost him sleep, dignity, and years of his life, but it was a promise he intended to keep. Now, Henry slept 3 to 4 hours a night. His back ached from bending over mop buckets. His knees protested every flight of stairs, but he never let Leo see the exhaustion. Every morning, he made breakfast. Every evening, he checked homework. Every night, he sat beside Leo's bed and listened to the boy breathe, making sure the nebulizer was working, making sure the inhaler was within reach. Henry had one thing most people lost along the way: self-respect. He would rather be poor than pathetic. He would rather struggle than surrender. Leo Carter was 8 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and a smile that could break hearts. Every night, he slept with a nebulizer humming beside his bed, the rhythmic hiss of medicated vapor filling the small bedroom. Every morning, he would wake up, his chest tight, his breathing labored, and he would smile at his father. "I'm fine, Dad. I promise." But Henry knew better. He remembered the night 9 months ago when Leo had woken up gasping, his lips turning blue, his small hands clutching at his throat. Henry had carried him to the car, breaking every speed limit on the way to the emergency room. The doctors had stabilized Leo within the hour, but the bill had become a shadow that followed Henry everywhere. $2,847. He was still paying it off in installments of $50 a month. That night had carved something permanent into Henry's chest. Not just love, desperation. The kind of desperation that made a man apply for a job he had no business applying for. Alexandra Reed was the CEO of Reed Financial and Real Estate Holdings, one of the most powerful corporations in the country. She was 42 years old, 6 feet tall in heels, and utterly terrifying to everyone who worked under her. People called her the Ice Queen. They called her ruthless. They called her a lot of things, most of them accurate. Alexandra didn't believe in small talk. She didn't believe in second chances, and she certainly didn't believe in excuses. She believed in results. She believed in accountability, And, perhaps most dangerously, she believed in fairness. Right now. Alexandra was overseeing a company-wide audit of hiring practices. It had started 3 months ago when an internal whistleblower sent an anonymous email detailing a pattern of discrimination in the recruitment process. Candidates with Ivy League degrees were fast-tracked. Candidates without degrees, regardless of experience, were filtered out before interviews even took place. The email had included names, dates, and examples. Alexandra had read it twice, her jaw tightening with each sentence. Then she had called an emergency meeting with the executive board and announced that she would personally oversee a full review. Some board members had protested. Alexandra had silenced them with a single sentence. "If we're only hiring people who look like us, we're not hiring the best, we're hiring mirrors." She didn't tell anyone why she cared so much. She didn't tell them about her father, a man who had worked 3 jobs to send her to college, only to be turned away from management positions his entire life because he lacked a degree. She didn't tell them about the day she had overheard her father being called uneducated by a man who couldn't change a tire or cook a meal. She didn't tell them that the reason she had clawed her way to the top was so that no one could ever dismiss her the way her father had been dismissed. She kept those memories locked away, but they fueled every decision she made. The opportunity appeared on a Tuesday night at 2:15 in the morning. Henry was mopping the executive lobby on the 40th floor. The building was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system and the distant sound of a cleaning cart rattling down a hallway. He straightened his back, wincing at the stiffness, and glanced up at the digital bulletin board mounted on the wall. Internal job postings rotated across the screen every 30 seconds. Most of them were for senior positions directors, managers, consultants. Henry usually ignored them. They weren't meant for people like him. But then the screen changed. Front desk support associate. Daytime hours. Full benefits. Salary range $48,000 to $55,000 annually. Henry froze. $48,000. That was more than he made in a year and a half as a janitor. That was health insurance. That was Leo getting the medicine he needed without Henry having to choose between pills and groceries. That was a future. Henry pulled out his phone, his hands trembling slightly, and took a picture of the posting. Then he stood there for a long time, staring at the words on the screen. His first thought was automatic. They'll never pick you. You're just a janitor. But his second thought was louder. What if they do? He thought about Leo. He thought about the inhaler that cost $80 every month. He thought about the hospital bills. He thought about the future he wanted to give his son, a future where Leo didn't have to worry about whether they could afford his medication. Henry opened his email app. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he started typing. Henry spent 3 hours that night drafting his cover letter. He didn't lie. He didn't exaggerate. He wrote about his 8 years in hotel customer service. He described his experience managing guest complaints, coordinating with maintenance and security teams, handling VIP arrivals, and de-escalating tense situations. He wrote about his ability to remain calm under pressure, his skill in multitasking, and his commitment to professionalism. At the end, where the application asked for education level, he paused. He could lie. He could claim to have some college credits. No one would check. But then he thought about Leo. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be. He typed the truth. High school diploma. No college degree. He attached his resume. Looked one last time at the photo of Leo he kept taped to the corner of his desk. Took a deep breath. And hit submit. 3 days later, the email arrived. Henry was eating breakfast with Leo oatmeal with brown sugar, because it was cheap and filling when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and nearly dropped his spoon. Subject interview invitation, front desk, support associate. Henry read the email 5 times. His hands were shaking. Leo noticed. "Dad, are you okay?" Henry looked up at his son, his heart pounding. "Yeah, buddy. Dad just got some good news." Leo grinned. "Really? What kind of good news?" Henry ruffled his hair. "The kind that might change things." The morning of the interview. Henry woke up at 5:30. He hadn't slept well. His mind had been racing all night, rehearsing answers, imagining scenarios, trying to convince himself he belonged in that room. He showered, shaved carefully, and then stood in front of the closet staring at the problem he had been avoiding. He didn't own a suit. He owned 2 pairs of jeans, 3 work shirts, and a jacket he had bought at a thrift store 6 years ago. He couldn't walk into an interview dressed like that. He called George, a coworker who had once worked in corporate finance before divorce and a layoff had sent him to the night shift. George was a good man. When Henry explained the situation, George didn't hesitate. "Come by before your shift. I've got something that'll fit." The suit was navy blue, slightly worn at the elbows, but clean and pressed. Henry tried it on in George's apartment. It was a little loose in the shoulders, but it would do. George adjusted the tie and stepped back, nodding. "You look good. Man, you look like you belong there." Henry met his eyes. "Thanks, George. I mean it." George clapped him on the shoulder. "Go show them what you've got." Before Henry left for the interview, he knelt down beside Leo. The boy was sitting on the couch, his inhaler on the table next to him, his nebulizer ready in case he needed it. Henry took both of Leo's hands. "Listen to me. Okay, I'm going to be gone for a couple of hours. If you start feeling like you can't breathe, if your chest gets tight, you call Mr. Thompson next door immediately. Do you understand?" Leo nodded seriously. "I will, Dad. I promise." Henry kissed his forehead. "I love you, buddy." Leo smiled. "Love you too. Good luck." As Henry walked out the door, he realized something. His heart wasn't in his chest. It was in that apartment, with that boy. The interview was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Henry arrived at 9:45. He took the elevator to the 23rd floor, where the HR offices were located. The waiting area was pristine white leather chairs, glass tables, abstract art on the walls. Henry sat down and tried to steady his breathing. 2 other candidates were waiting. A young woman in a sharp gray blazer, scrolling through her phone. A man in his 20s, wearing designer glasses and an expression of casual confidence. They didn't look at Henry. He didn't expect them to. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman in her 30s stepped into the waiting area. "Henry Carter." Henry stood. "That's me." She smiled politely. "I'm Melissa, HR assistant. Follow me, please." Henry followed her down a long hallway lined with frosted glass offices. She stopped at a conference room and opened the door. "Have a seat. The panel will be with you shortly." The interview room was cold and bright. A long table, 3 empty chairs on one side, 1 chair on the other. Henry sat down and folded his hands on the table. His palms were sweating. A moment later, the door opened. 3 people entered. The first was a man in his 50s. Gray hair, expensive suit, an expression that suggested he had better places to be. That was Wilfred, the head of human resources. The second was Melissa, who took a seat and opened a leather folder. The third was a younger man, maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a bored expression. That was Clinton, the operations manager for the front desk team. Wilfred didn't bother with pleasantries. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Carter, let's begin. Tell us why you're interested in this position." Henry had rehearsed this answer 100 times. He kept his voice steady. I've spent 8 years in customer service, most of that in high-pressure hotel environments. I know how to manage difficult clients, coordinate with teams, and stay calm when things go wrong. I believe I can bring that experience to this role and provide excellent service to Reed Holdings." Wilfred nodded, but his expression didn't change. "Walk us through a specific example of a difficult situation you've handled." Henry leaned forward slightly. 3 years ago, I was working the front desk at the Whitmore Hotel. A VIP guest arrived for a conference, and we had accidentally double-booked his suite. He was furious, understandably. I apologized immediately, explained the situation, and offered him an upgrade to our executive penthouse at no additional charge. I personally ensured his luggage was moved. His check-in was expedited, and I followed up with him that evening to make sure everything was satisfactory. He ended up writing a positive review and requesting me by name for his next stay. Clinton nodded. For the first time. He looked interested. "That's solid. What about handling multiple priorities?" Henry described another situation. A group of 60 international clients had arrived 2 hours early for a corporate retreat. The conference rooms weren't ready. The catering hadn't arrived. Chaos was imminent. Henry had coordinated with housekeeping to expedite room preparation, contacted the catering company to push the delivery forward, and personally greeted each group leader to assure them everything was under control. Within 45 minutes, the situation was resolved. Clinton wrote something down. Melissa was nodding. The interview was going well. Henry allowed himself a flicker of hope. Then Wilfred leaned back in his chair and asked the question that changed everything. "Tell me, Mr. Carter, where did you complete your undergraduate degree?" The room seemed to pause. Henry felt the shift immediately. He had known this was coming. He had prepared for it. But hearing the question out loud still felt like a punch to the stomach. He met Wilfred's eyes. "I didn't attend college. I started working right after high school to support my family." Wilfred's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. The air in the room grew colder. Melissa glanced down at her notes. Clinton shifted in his seat. Wilfred tapped his pen against the table. "I see. And what is your current position?" Henry knew where this was going. He could have lied. He could have said he was between jobs. But he had promised himself he would tell the truth. "I'm a night custodian here, in this building." Silence. Melissa looked up sharply. Clinton blinked. Wilfred's mouth tightened into a thin line. The questions that followed were different. They weren't about what Henry could do. They were about who he was, or rather, who he wasn't. "Do you have any management training?" "No." "Have you completed any professional development courses?" "No." "Do you have experience with enterprise-level client management software?" "No." Each answer felt like another nail in the coffin. Finally, Wilfred leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. His voice was perfectly polite, perfectly cold. "Mr. Carter, I appreciate your time today. But I have to ask, do you genuinely believe you represent the image this company projects to its clients?" The insult was subtle, but it landed like a slap. Henry kept his voice steady, even though his chest felt tight. "I believe my experience and my attitude represent this company better than a suit or a degree ever could." Wilfred smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We'll be in touch. Thank you for your time." Henry stood. He didn't plead. He didn't argue. He simply nodded. "Thank you for the opportunity." He walked out of the conference room, his back straight, his head up. But inside, he was collapsing. He made it to the elevator before his hands started shaking. He stepped inside and watched the doors close. His reflection stared back at him from the polished steel, a man in a borrowed suit. A man who had just been told he wasn't good enough. The elevator descended. Henry closed his eyes and took a slow breath. At least I tried. At least Leo won't think I was too afraid to try. The doors opened on the ground floor. Henry walked through the lobby, past the gleaming marble floors he had mopped 100 times, past the security desk, past the reception area where he had imagined himself working. He pushed through the glass doors and stepped outside. It was pouring rain. Of course it was. Henry stood under the awning for a moment, staring out at the street. He didn't have an umbrella. He didn't have a car. He was going to have to walk 6 blocks to the bus stop in a suit that wasn't his. He was about to step into the rain when he heard it. "Henry Carter!" "Stop!" The voice was sharp, commanding, and unmistakably female. Henry turned. Alexandra Reed was running toward him. She wasn't wearing a coat. She didn't have an umbrella. Her designer heels clicked against the wet pavement. Within seconds, she was soaked. Every person in the lobby froze. Security guards stared. Receptionists stopped mid-sentence. The CEO of Reed Holdings was chasing a janitor into the rain. Alexandra didn't waste time. She grabbed Henry's arm and pulled him back under the awning. Water dripped from her hair. Her blouse was plastered to her shoulders. She didn't seem to care. "I watched your interview." Henry stiffened. He had a feeling he knew where this was going. Some kind of apology, some kind of corporate damage control. He opened his mouth to tell her he didn't need pity, but Alexandra spoke first. "What just happened in that room was wrong." Henry blinked. "I'm sorry." Alexandra's eyes were fierce. "You heard me. That interview was a disgrace, and I'm not going to let it stand." Henry's throat tightened. He didn't trust himself to speak. Alexandra continued, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain. 2 months ago, my business partner, Irene Lawson, nearly collapsed in the main lobby. Low blood sugar. She was dizzy, disoriented, on the verge of passing out. Do you remember that? Henry frowned, thinking back. Then it clicked. The older woman in the expensive coat. She had been swaying near the elevators. Henry had seen it happen. He had walked over, asked if she was okay, recognized the signs of hypoglycemia. He had pulled a candy bar from his pocket his lunch, actually, and given it to her. He had called security, made sure she sat down, stayed with her until the paramedics arrived. He hadn't thought about it since. It was just what you did when someone needed help. Alexandra nodded, reading his expression. She told me about you. She said a man mopping floors saved her life. I was out of the country that week. By the time I got back, I didn't know who you were or how to find you. Today, I was reviewing interview footage as part of the hiring audit. I saw your face on the monitor. I recognized you immediately. Henry felt something crack inside his chest. If you're offering me the job because I helped someone... Alexandra cut him off. I'm not offering you the job. I'm offering you justice. She explained quickly, her words precise and deliberate. The company was in the middle of a culture review. Too many complaints had surfaced about bias in hiring, about candidates being rejected based on pedigree rather than performance. Henry wasn't the first person to be dismissed because he didn't fit the profile, but Alexandra intended to make him the last. This isn't charity, Mr. Carter. This is accountability. What happened to you today happens to dozens of qualified people every year, and I'm going to put a stop to it, starting now. Henry didn't know what to say. He had spent so long expecting nothing that he didn't know how to process this. Alexandra pulled out her phone and made a call. Wilfred, Melissa, Clinton, meet me in the main lobby, immediately. She hung up and looked at Henry. You're about to get an apology, and they're about to get a lesson. 5 minutes later, the three of them stepped out of the elevator. Wilfred looked confused. Melissa looked nervous. Clinton looked annoyed. They spotted Alexandra and hurried over. Then they saw Henry. Their expressions changed. Wilfred recovered first. "Ms. Reed, I wasn't aware." Alexandra held up a hand. "Explain to me why you rejected Henry Carter." Wilfred glanced at Henry, then back at Alexandra. "He doesn't have the required qualifications." Alexandra's voice dropped to a deadly calm. "The job description doesn't require a degree. So tell me again, why did you reject him?" Wilfred shifted uncomfortably. "It's preferred." Alexandra cut him off. "Preferred based on what performance or prejudice?" Wilfred's face flushed. "That's not fair." Alexandra stepped closer. "What's not fair is telling a man with 8 years of experience that he doesn't represent this company's image. What's not fair is dismissing someone because they clean floors at night instead of sitting in a corner office. What's not fair is the system you've built that filters out people before they even get a chance." Clinton tried to interject. "We have standards." Alexandra turned on him. "Standards or stereotypes? Let me ask you something. Clinton, what is this company's image? Is it a designer suit? Is it a degree from an expensive school? Or is it competence, professionalism, and the ability to solve problems under pressure?" She gestured to Henry. "This man de-escalated an angry VIP guest and turned him into a repeat customer. This man coordinated a crisis involving 60 clients and resolved it in under an hour. This man saved a woman's life because he was paying attention when no one else was. So tell me, does he represent this company or not?" Melissa, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but firm. "He does. He absolutely does." Wilfred shot her a look, but it was too late. Alexandra nodded. "Then the decision to reject him is overturned." Wilfred opened his mouth to protest, but Alexandra silenced him with a single glance. "This isn't up for discussion. Consider this your notice that the hiring process is changing, effective immediately." She turned to Henry. "Mr. Carter, I'd like to speak with you privately." They walked to a small conference room off the main lobby. Alexandra closed the door and gestured for Henry to sit. "I'm not going to hand you the job. That wouldn't be fair to you or to anyone else, but I am going to give you a real chance." She outlined her proposal. A 2-month paid training program. Henry would be compensated at double his current salary starting immediately. He and Leo would receive full health insurance from day one, including coverage for pre-existing conditions. At the end of the training, if Henry demonstrated the necessary skills, he would be hired as a front desk associate. If he didn't, he could return to his custodial position with no penalty and no stigma. Henry listened, his heart pounding. "Why are you doing this?" Alexandra met his eyes. "Because someone should have done it for my father, and because you deserve a fair shot." Henry swallowed hard. "People are going to hate me." Alexandra didn't sugarcoat it. "Some will, but that's not your problem. That's theirs. I need you to stand there and prove that effort and integrity matter more than a pedigree. Can you do that?" Henry thought about Leo. He thought about the promise he had made. "Yes, I can." Alexandra extended her hand. "Then we have a deal." The first week of training was brutal. The program included 6 candidates. 4 of them had bachelor's degrees. 2 had master's degrees. All of them were younger than Henry. None of them acknowledged him. When Henry introduced himself on the first day, mentioning his background in hotel services, one of the younger men, a business school graduate named Tyler, had smirked and whispered something to the woman next to him. Henry had heard it anyway. "Guess they're really lowering the bar." Henry had said nothing. He had sat down, opened his notebook, and prepared to prove them wrong. The lead trainer was a woman named Audrey, a no-nonsense veteran of the hospitality industry with 23 years of experience. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, and unimpressed by credentials. She didn't care about degrees. She cared about results. On the first day, she had looked around the room and said, "I don't care where you went to school. I care whether you can do the job. If you can't handle pressure, stress, and difficult people, you won't make it here. Some of you will wash out. That's fine. Better to know now than to fail in front of a client." She threw scenarios at them rapid fire. An irate client whose package was lost and who was threatening legal action. A double-booked conference room with 2 executive teams arriving in 10 minutes. A vendor arriving 3 hours late with critical supplies for a board presentation starting in 30 minutes. A system outage affecting the phone lines during peak check-in hours. Each scenario was timed. Each response was evaluated. Henry handled each one with calm precision. He had lived these situations when the angry client appeared. Henry apologized, verified the tracking information, contacted the courier service, arranged for a replacement to be delivered by the end of the day, and offered a discount on the client's next order. When the conference room was double booked, Henry secured an alternate space, personally escorted both teams to their locations, and ensured they each had refreshments and the correct equipment. When the vendor was late, Henry contacted the presenter, explained the situation, arranged for backup materials, and had the critical supplies delivered to the correct room the moment they arrived. The other candidates fumbled. They hesitated. They tried to apply textbook solutions to real-world chaos. Tyler, the business school graduate, argued with Audrey about whether his response was technically correct according to customer service theory. Audrey had shut him down immediately. "This isn't a classroom. Clients don't care about theory. They care about results." Henry said nothing. He just kept working. But the real obstacle wasn't the training. It was Wilfred. The HR director couldn't retaliate openly. Alexandra had made it clear that any interference would result in immediate termination, but he found other ways to make Henry's life difficult. He scheduled Henry's training sessions at inconsistent times, often with less than 24 hours' notice, forcing Henry to scramble for childcare. He graded Henry's assessments with excessive scrutiny, marking him down for minor infractions like forgetting to CC a supervisor on an email or using slightly informal language in a written response. He made sure everyone knew that Henry was only there because the CEO was protecting him. The whispers followed Henry everywhere. Favoritism, nepotism, special treatment. Henry overheard Tyler saying it out loud in the break room. "He's only here because Reed felt sorry for him. He'll be gone in a month." Henry didn't fight back. He didn't complain. He just worked harder. He arrived early. He stayed late. He asked questions. He took notes. He treated every task like it mattered. At night, after training, he still picked up occasional custodial shifts to pay off old debts. He was exhausted, but he kept going. Then, 3 weeks into the program, Leo had another asthma attack. Henry got the call at 7 in the evening. He was in the middle of reviewing training materials at the apartment when his phone rang. It was Mr. Thompson, the neighbor, and his voice was panicked. "Henry, you need to come home right now. Leo can't breathe. I'm with him, but it's bad." Henry's blood turned to ice. He was already at home. He dropped the phone and ran to Leo's room. His son was on the couch, his face pale, his chest heaving with the effort of pulling in air. The sound of his breathing, that high-pitched wheeze, made Henry's stomach drop. He grabbed the rescue inhaler from the table, shook it, and administered 2 puffs. Leo inhaled as best he could. They waited. 15 seconds, 30 seconds. Nothing changed. Leo's lips were starting to turn blue around the edges. Henry grabbed his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unlock it. He was about to dial 911 when he remembered. The insurance. The new insurance that had started the day he began training. He pulled up the benefits information, found the 24-hour nurse hotline, and called. A nurse answered on the second ring. Henry explained the situation. his voice tight with fear. The nurse asked questions. How long had Leo been having trouble breathing? Had he used his inhaler? What were his oxygen levels if Henry had a pulse oximeter? Which he didn't. The nurse stayed calm. She walked Henry through a protocol. She told him to keep Leo sitting upright, to have him try to take slow, controlled breaths, and to stay on the line. She conferenced in an on-call physician. Within 5 minutes, the doctor was asking Henry more questions. Within 10 minutes, he had authorized an emergency prescription for a stronger corticosteroid that could be picked up at the pharmacy within the hour. He also arranged for a home health nurse to check on Leo the next morning. Henry felt tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The doctor's voice was kind. "You did the right thing by calling. Get that medication and give him the first dose tonight. He should start feeling better within a few hours." Henry called Mr. Thompson, who agreed to stay with Leo while Henry ran to the 24-hour pharmacy. Henry sprinted the 4 blocks, picked up the medication, and sprinted back. By the time he administered the first dose, it was nearly 8:30, within an hour. Leo's breathing had eased. Within 2 hours, he was breathing almost normally. Henry sat beside his son on the couch, holding his small hand, tears streaming down his face. Leo looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "It's okay, Dad. I'm okay now." Henry kissed his forehead. "I know, buddy. I know." That night, Henry didn't sleep. He sat in the chair beside Leo's bed and watched him breathe. He thought about what would have happened if he hadn't had the insurance. He would have had to take Leo to the emergency room. Another $2,000 bill. Another year of payments. Or worse. He thought about what Alexandra had given him. Not just a job. Not just a chance. She had given him the ability to save his son's life without going bankrupt. This opportunity wasn't just about a better future. It was about survival. The breakthrough came during the 5th week. A VIP client, a woman named Mrs. Callahan, arrived 2 hours early for a board meeting. She was anxious, flustered, and no one was prepared. The other trainees panicked, talking over each other, trying to find someone to handle it. Henry stepped forward. He greeted Mrs. Callahan calmly, offered her a seat in a quiet alcove, brought her tea, and assured her that he would personally ensure everything was ready when she needed it. Then he contacted the facilities team, confirmed the meeting room was available early, arranged for refreshments, and checked in with her every 15 minutes. Mrs. Callahan was impressed. When the board meeting ended, she asked to speak to Alexandra Reed. By the end of the day, she had sent a formal letter of commendation. The next morning, Audrey pulled Henry aside. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're the best trainee I've seen in 5 years." Henry nodded, not trusting himself to speak. That afternoon, one of the other trainees, a young woman named Rachel who had barely spoken to him, approached him during a break. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I thought you didn't belong here. I was wrong. You're really good at this." Henry felt something loosen in his chest. "Thanks. That means a lot." On the day Henry officially began his position as a front desk associate, he wore a suit he had bought with his first real paycheck. It was charcoal gray, tailored to fit, and it was his, not borrowed, not handed down, his. He stood behind the reception desk at 7:45 in the morning and looked out across the marble lobby. This was the same floor he had mopped at 2 in the morning, the same elevator bank he had cleaned, the same glass doors he had polished. But now, he stood here as an equal, at 8:15. Wilfred walked through the lobby. He glanced at Henry, his expression unreadable, and kept walking. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence was its own admission. At 8:30, Alexandra Reed walked past. She didn't stop. She didn't make a speech. She just met Henry's eyes, nodded once, and kept walking. The message was clear. I gave you fairness. You earned the rest. That evening, Henry texted Leo. Dad didn't win the lottery, but Dad didn't give up either. The next day was Saturday. Henry brought Leo to the building. It was Leo's first time seeing where his father worked during the day. They stood outside, looking up at the glass tower. Leo's eyes were wide. This is where you work now. Henry nodded. This is where I work. Leo grabbed his father's hand. I'm proud of you, Dad. Henry's throat tightened. I'm proud of you too, buddy. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. But the lesson about prejudice, about dignity, about fighting for what you deserve, that lesson would stay with Henry forever. And he would make damn sure Leo learned it too. Dignity isn't given by people who think they're better than you. It's something you keep, even when they try to take it away.